So let's talk a little bit about the practice of typecasting. You'll hear when people talk about typecasting, it's usually cast in a very negative light, and I can understand that. I've worked as both an actor and a director, and I can tell you from the acting point of view, you really do get tired of people saying that this is the type of characters that you can play, and not ever feeling like they can move you up in the pecking order unless something happens. Someone drops out or whatever, and then maybe you get a chance. Or, you know, it's an ensemble piece and a lead role is more blended with the other roles. But as a director, I can tell you that the practice of typecasting does happen, and it's not a malicious thing. I'd say 90% of the time. I'm not going to speak for every director. I can say when I do it, it's not a malicious thing. It's a time saver. You only have so long to communicate to an audience the story and the characters. And when you kind of can stick with people who fit a type, that is a battle on one or two fronts that you don't have to necessarily fight. You know, if you know an actor can play a certain type of role, if you know they can pull off this certain type of role, not just given the time limitations you have for the performance, but the time limitations you have rehearsing 10 to 9 times out of 10, you know, it means that there's a little bit more breathing room. It's a blessing and a curse. Boris Karloff said that the greatest thing that could ever happen to any actor was to be typecast, because it meant that you had created a role that was so memorable and so ingrained in the popular culture that that is what people would always see you as. I think that sounds great from a legacy standpoint. You know, looking at your body of work after you're dead and going, wow, didn't they create such a fantastic movie monster? But in the present tense, as you're living and trying to find work, what it means is you're getting cast as a lot of mad scientists and creepy characters. So while the practice of typecasting is done, and while I think it is necessary sometimes, it can also be, you know, incredibly harmful. You know, it pigeonholes people into certain roles. I know there are people who use it to keep certain groups or genders or religions down and not give them meatier parts. So you know that happens, and sometimes, you know, it can almost nullify a person's actual personality in favor of what has become the perceived type that actor plays. You know, I think one of the best examples of that is probably Sylvester Stallone, who his public image and the way he's portrayed in the media, he is always this kind of monosyllabic caveman, you know, uneducated goof. And that is not the man. I mean, if you really listen to him, if you watch some of his films or you hear him talk, he is an incredibly intelligent, very well-spoken, and unbelievably talented person. You know, I would say of his ilk, that kind of 80s muscle man action star group, I think he's probably the most talented. But he's had trouble parlaying that into other roles outside of the kind of monosyllabic tough guy. But in the late 80s and going into the early 90s, boy, he was trying, and all of them were, because they knew that their action movies were kind of petering out. They've done multiple sequels. So a lot of them were trying to branch out into other things, including comedy. And this had varying success. We've talked a little about Arnold Schwarzenegger's forays into comedy. But Sylvester Stallone's work has been kind of deemed awful, crimes against humanity in cinema, and I don't think that's true. I think he had a number of pretty good to very good movies under his comedy belt, including 1991's Oscar. Now, I gotta say before I go, I have very fond memories of this movie. I remember when this movie came out, I was still in elementary school, and my elementary school would do this camp every year, like the 6th grade camp or 5th grade camp. I did not want to go, if for no other reason than I couldn't stand being in the classroom with some of those students and teachers, and the fact of sleeping away with them for 3 or 4 days, or it was a week actually, if I remember correctly. That held no appeal to me. So I refused to go. I outright refused to go. And my parents were really cool about it. It's one of the things I always love about my parents. They were just like, all right, you know, they didn't see the point, so they were good with it. So the first year, my mom and I basically made up the story that I was sick. And I stayed home. So I got to spend a week home just chilling out. And one day my mom and I went to the movies and we saw this one. And I always remember that. It was a really fun time. It was a really great memory with my mom, kind of playing hooky and having a good time. So I have nostalgia for this movie, but I also have a deep-seated respect and love for this movie. I think it is fantastic and much maligned in ways I don't think it deserves. Trying to explain the plot for those who have not heard of it or seen it is difficult. And really, you can't explain the plot. So I'm going to give you the basic bullet points. So in the early 1930s, I can't remember if it was 31 or 30 itself, Sylvester Stallone plays renowned gangster Angelo Snaps Provolone, who makes a promise to his dying father that he is going to quit the gangster racket and go straight. So, flash forward a month later, he is preparing to become a banker. He's going to meet with a group of bankers at noon to sign the paperwork. So, of course, this is a day that he needs to go well. And, of course, as anybody who's seen a comedy or has lived life can tell you, on the days you need everything to go right, that is the day absolutely everything goes wrong. Again, I cannot list out in sequence everything that happens, but let's just give you some of the high points. His accountant, Little Anthony, comes to his house, wakes him up and tells him that he's been stealing his money and sleeping with his daughter. His daughter tells him that she is pregnant. She's lying to him, but she tells him she's pregnant, and so she can get out of the house. His maid quits, and there is switching of this bag that has her underwear in it, but it's also switched out with a bag of jewels and a bag of hard cash. You got a police lieutenant across the street who's watching the house and taking notes because he thinks he's finally going to catch Sylvester Stallone doing stuff illegal. It's just an increasingly crazy series of events throughout the day leading up to this noon luncheon. What's funny about this movie, a lot of things are funny actually about the movie itself, but what's funny about the reputation of this movie is that when it came out, it got fairly good reviews critically. I mean, it's on the frickin' box. Siskel and Ebert, who were the creme de la creme of movie reviewers at the time, gave it 2 thumbs up. That did not translate into box office, and it hasn't translated into helping this movie's reputation as the years have gone on. And I think the reason that this film did not do well at the time is based on what it is and when it was released. I've said it a lot on this show that such and such movie is a product of its time. Such and such is just a product of its time. But the thing about Oscar is that it is not a product of its time. It's a product of a different time. This movie, if you could probably tell from the little description I gave, which doesn't even tell you half of the shit that went on in this thing, this is a farce. This is the textbook definition of a farce. Slamming doors, misplaced objects, switched objects, mistaken identities, people trying to marry the wrong person. I wish I could show this in my theater classes when I'm trying to explain what a farce is. It's like, it's this. This is a farce. But it is a screwball farce that Hollywood had not produced since, I think the 40s or 50s. Seriously, if you put this thing in black and white, you slap Cary Grant in it instead of Sylvester Stallone, it'd be playing nonstop on Turner Classic Movies, and Robert Osborne, God rest his soul, would be telling you how it's one of the best comedies ever made. And that time period, not so much the time period the movie takes place in, but the time period of the style of movie it is all throughout this. This feels like a movie from the 40s. In the terms of its the farcical plot, the look of the film, the sets are gorgeous, the costumes are phenomenal. It's a gorgeous looking movie, but it feels like an anachronism in 91, coming out of the 80s and starting to establish the 90s. That screwball comedy kind of thing was passé and not done, at least not to the extent this is still fairly clean, and that wasn't done. The screwball comedy was going a lot darker around that time, a little bit more cynical, and this is not. Again, this feels very golden age of Hollywood. So I can understand that at the time that sensibility just didn't play. Now, for me, who loves that shit, this movie's my jam. I love this movie, like, to death. I love the feel of it. I love the farcical nature. It's theatrical because it's based on a play that I am sad to say I have never been able to find a hard copy of, because I'd love to read it, but from what I understand, it's written in another language, so I need a translator. But still, I really am mad I've never been able to find the play version of this, because I'd love to see how close it sticks to the movie, or the movie sticks to it. It's golden age comedy, which I am a huge fan of. Again, it's hard to criticize or critique a comedy, because all you can say is, does this appeal to me or does this appeal to someone else? This appeals to my sensibilities. It's got great dialogue. It's got some really funny jokes. It's got groaner jokes that are still kind of funny with their charm. It's got kind of vaudeville-esque routines back and forth. The humor in this just works for me. I love it. And I think another thing that this film has going for it, it put together a simply phenomenal cast. Stallone is doing a great job in this. Let's talk about tone first. One of the things that makes the comedy in this work is the movie is very upfront with the fact that this is not reality. This is a heightened reality. We're not quite into Looney Tunes, Mel Brooks, stylings, but we're not into realism. So the movie opens, it does a cold opening with Provolone making the promise to his father, and the cold open ends with him getting smacked across the face by his dying father, and Stallone giving a look directly into the camera, almost kind of thing. Then we get the credits, which is done by a little claymation dude who looks like he should be hawking pizza, singing opera while the credits roll, and then we go into the movie. That operatic feel, that bigger than life, bigger emotions, bigger reactions is seen throughout the movie, so that even when a joke that is a bit too big happens, it's not jarring because they've basically set up for you, this is a comedic opera. That's an oxymoron. So tonally, it really, and I didn't get any of that as a kid, the operatic, overtones, but it's there. And it's really smart that they did that. I think it enhances the humor because just from that what you're seeing is not meant to be taken seriously. As Mystery Science Theater would say, it's just a movie, why don't I just relax kind of thing. So anyway, back to the cast. So Stallone, doing a great job. I will not ever come in front of you and say Stallone is the quintessential actor. I think he plays a few things incredibly well. Rocky, obviously. And other things he's passable in. But I think he has a lot more talent than people give him credit for. He's got his bigger than life persona here, but it's much more controlled. You can see he's channeling all the big gangster movies. He's channeling a little Edward G. Robinson, a little Bogart, a little Cagney, mixed with his own, Italian stallion kind of charisma. And it comes off great. He's a little too big in places, but it's big in a way that fits the story. And I think he really shows off some great comic timing here. I've said it before, but that vaudeville back and forth is not an easy thing to do. But he's doing it really, really well. So, yeah, I think in terms of, like I say, his contemporaries, the Schwarzeneggers, the Willises, and the likes, all trying to do their comedy shtick, I think he had the best taste for it. I think he had the best head for it. They also give him a really great supporting cast to play off of it, even though he is the star, clearly. It's an ensemble piece. He has some great comedic actors. It's again, kind of the Seinfeld thing. Stallone is good, but he is not, he's not on some of these comedic actors' level. So you surround him with really great comedic actors and it lifts him up. I really like what I was thinking watching this recently is that I guess in this day and age, you're always asking the question, how offended am I supposed to be? I've mentioned it before. I am Italian by, of Italian descent, Italian-Irish. So I'm always very sensitive to how the Italians and the Irish are portrayed. Italians, especially because, they seem to be the one culture you can still do a lot of horrific stereotypes about, and nobody seems to ever come to their defense, and like I mentioned it in the While You Were Sleeping review, that I was a little bit offended by the Joe Jr. Stereotype, but I'm not offended by this, and I'm not sure why. I can't give you a flow chart and say this offends me and this doesn't, and here's where the breaking point is. I think why this doesn't offend me, even though these are all great Italian actors, Italian-American actors playing these Italian-American stereotypes, is because it's a joke. It's a parody. It's the Chico Marx thing. I'm not offended by Chico Marx because it's a joke. We're not supposed to take him seriously, and we're not supposed to take the Italians seriously here. They're playing into the stereotype and having fun with the stereotype, and that I find okay. That doesn't bug me. In fact, I really kind of dig it. And I love the gangsters in this. That's the funny thing about this, is that so they make no qualms that these are gangsters, that he is a gangster. He is a murderer. He extorts people. He bootlegs. So they make jokes about it repeatedly. But the thing about Snaps and his kind of entourage is that they're never portrayed as, Godfather gangsters. These are Damon Runyon, Goodfellas, and Guys and Dolls type things. These are Goombas and Mamalukes. Knuckleheads and stooges. They're lovable. You got Snaps himself, and then you got his core group of, you know, henchmen who are trying to transition from being gunmen and hitmen into butlers and cooks, you know, and they're great. Chaz Palminteri and Peter Riegert are the two main ones, Aldo and Connie, and they're fantastic. They also have Harry Shearer and Martin Ferrero as these suit makers who come in, very, very, very Chico marks. You know, we famous, we cannot do that no more. You know, and I don't know, just they're so lovable and fun. I don't know, I love it. Ornella Metti, I'm mispronouncing her name, Ornella Metti, who is a great Italian actor, mostly known for her work in Italian movies, plays his wife. She is phenomenal. She doesn't have a lot of scenes. She's a very lovely woman, but what I love is you can tell she's fucking Italian, baby. Not just in, you know, the accent, but the way she glares at him when she's mad at him, or when she is, you know, about to lay into him. Oh, the dagger she stares at him, and that's an Italian woman. Like, you'd see, this is a woman who could be married to a gangster. So she's great. The late great Don Amici brings his wonderful voice and energy to it in a small role as a priest who comes by. Kurtwood Smith is the detective I mentioned. You know who else is in that? A couple people who are in this. It's kind of surprising. Might surprise you. Marissa Tomei. This is right before My Cousin Vinny, so she hasn't really hit big. But man, she is just going to town playing that Italian-American princess. You know, she is just playing that archetype up, and she's doing a great job. Tim Curry is in this, making his third appearance on Forgotten Gems. But not in a villain role. I know it's so weird. When we think Tim Curry, we think villain. We think over-the-top, you know, scenery-chewing villain. But he is not. He plays the elocution teacher who comes to teach Sylvester Stallone how to speak properly. And he is so charmingly befuddled in this. It's delightful. And you legitimately forget how good an actor Tim Curry is, and that he can do more than play just slimy villains. True, that's what he does best. But his character in this is just adorable. He's wonderful. I'm like, yay, Dr. Poole. So yeah, Tim Curry's in this. It's fantastic. Is this movie perfect? No movie is perfect, but I'm being honest here. I have a hard time really pinpointing anything about this movie I don't like, or any place where it doesn't hit the mark. I think it's brilliantly directed and very well acted. I guess if there is a flaw, a major flaw, I think that the pacing of it should pick up as the insanity kind of kicks in more and more. And it feels like they deal with every new calamity and every new twist in the plot kind of the same, as opposed to it getting crazier and crazier and crazier. But that is a minor complaint about this film. I hesitate to even call it a complaint. It's more of an observation. I think this is a pretty, like I said, if this movie was made in the 40s, it'd be on Turner Classic nonstop. I just think it's that well done. Again, comedy is, all art is subjective, but comedy especially. I know I'm hard to please comically, but this film does it. I laugh my ass off at this film. I have whole sections of it memorized, and I like to play it back in my head. It's a great film, and I think, especially now, as you know, you're stuck inside and you know you're looking for something new to try, maybe it's time to give this one a lookin' and see if you find it as charming and enjoyable as I do. I hope you do. All right, so that's Oscar. So thanks for joining us. We always have more to come. We're always here. So keep calm and carry on, and as always, Drive safe, and I will see you at the movies.